Okay, welcome. Matt wanted to discuss or revisit a discussion about security for bucket logging.
Yeah,
What's
just
on your
quickly.
mind?
Well, why? Apparently, I talked with Paulie this morning about it. He said he thought we had agreed to do um, to create a new service principal or a system user or whatever to do that. And I wanted to understand why we can't use some sort of policy extension to do that. It doesn't seem appealing to create system users. And it occurred to me while formulating the statement that there's something kind of similar that goes on in bucket inventory. I haven't even looked at exactly what AWS does there, but when it similarly has a concept of upload the thing here, and it can be wherever it can be anywhere. And I don't know what my intent what would be to deal with there, but sending them to other S3 endpoints seems like one thing, but for our purposes, for if they specify a local endpoints at least, um, we should be doing with it. But I wanted to understand why we can't use policy, you know, because that's we have it, and it prevents and it seems like one reason I guess would be we can't extend it. We need a way of saying this is what we're securing. But my thinking is that that's probably possible. If it is possible, what are the problems with that approach?
Sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding. You said something about a system user, but I don't think that's required anywhere. And what
Well, I don't know what the other
policy would
thing
you want to extend?
even. Well, why can't we have bucket policy or user policy that specify or something that specifies that here's this bucket can be a target of log operations or this user's log operations or something or log operations for this bucket.
So I mean, the current AWS idea is that the operation type that we need to give to the user is put object, but it's not a regular put object. There is a service principal that is called something like logging, and the combination of the service principal called logging and the operation policy on the put object is the combination of those two things gives the ability to put log objects to the destination bucket. And what Matt suggested is, why don't we just invent a new kind of operation, which is log object, and then we don't need to do the service principal at all. It's a regular policy.
Who would you grant permission to use the log object? Like what principal would you grant that permission to?
Well, even today, I have to grant the permission to someone specific on the source bucket, right? Otherwise, I mean, I cannot grant. So I don't want to say, oh, this bucket, this destination bucket could be used as a log bucket for any source bucket, right? I need to restrict that as well. Or if I don't want to restrict that, then I create some kind of a wildcard saying anyone can do that. But I mean, I don't even understand why we need the service principal here, and except for as an indication that it's not a regular put object, it's only a put object coming from logging.
Yeah. So it's possible that we can invent smarter. I haven't tried to be creative about how you could construct the policy grant. Maybe instead of against a user, maybe you could grant it against a bucket. Maybe you can construct some sort of ARN for that. But I think we have. But I'd like to understand really if we have the ability to extend policy. I think we do. I don't think like you've always saying maybe the SDKs would foil that or something. I don't think that's the case, but I'd like to confirm that. And if it is, if that is the case, then policy is certainly policy is more useful to us if it's extensible. I think that it is.
I think currently the way that they do that, they give the allow to the service principal, but they restrict that using the source ARN. So they put the source bucket ARN or the source account.
So we could do
as
exactly the
the-
same thing, and that would be and I do like that. That we could do, hypothetically we could do the same thing, but use the log action.
Yeah, and then you don't need to have this special combination of put object together with principal service of logging, which is kind of strange. You just say, okay, I have the action could be put log or something, and then the rest of the things are regular policy.
I guess I don't understand the objection to the service principal. I mean, I just feel like if AWS has a way to do this already, we should do that instead of extending our policy to do it in a different way.
I'm not very comfortable with that argument. I mean, I don't. I think what AWS is doing doesn't make a lot of sense, and I think we want to be able to extend policy. To do so. Policy management is more useful if it's uniform. But we're not exactly the same thing as AWS, so we don't we wouldn't want to be forbidden from inventing behaviors and controlling them with policy. But the source principle idea just isn't anywhere in anything else we've worked with in our implementation, and don't find it very appealing.
Do you know what how the bucket inventory works?
I don't know everything about it. So I could go for it. I could come back with that information. I mean, whether it's applicable here or not. I mean, but it has similar. It must have similar constraints. I don't know if it has a service principle because I wasn't aware of that being a thing. I feel I should have checked. I was actually typing. I was actually thinking that when I articulated the statement. I mean, I hadn't thought very. I've been thinking murkily about it.
I linked an AWS doc, and it does, the first policy example does grant to a service principal.
So I think it would apply. Similarly, I don't.
It also shows up in the replication policy. So I would like to have a strategy to handle that uniformly. So I mean, again, if we do add service principal support, then we have 3 uses for it. But if we add a policy extension for bucket logging, that's not going to help with either of the others. We would have to add other extensions for those. Is that right?
Well,
Yeah,
you could use
but
the exact same mechanism, so I don't.
adding those extensions is like super simple. You add something to an enum, and then you verify the policy, passing this enum as the operation. That's it. Everything else is already in there. I mean, unless there's an issue with the client SDK. So an issue with the client SDK could be a reason for not doing that. But from our perspective, it's very simple to add as many operations as someone wants.
It's simple in the code, but I'm not sure that it's simple for users. I mean, we would have to document all of our extensions and how they're different. People couldn't look at the Amazon docs and use the
Well,
examples and have them just work. I think there would be a benefit.
I want to make a statement here. I mean, maybe this is a different theme, but I strongly object to a constraint that we not add any operators to policy to support capabilities of RGW. That's a somewhat different distinction that we're making here. But you seem to be reaching to that, and I reject that.
I mean, we've extended S3 several times. I think that we have some non-compliant stuff in policy as well, but I just would prefer to be AWS compatible where possible instead of inventing something new. That's all. But Yuval, if you're working on bucket logging, if you feel strongly about this, then it's your call.
Okay, I don't have any more to lobby there.
Sorry, sorry, I was muted. I have a quick question. So, do we support the condition part of the policy for doing filtering on, let's say, a source bucket ARN and a source account?
We
We're
do
supposed to
support conditions,
that.
but you have to initialize the source ARN and source account for the code path where you're calling in. In the tracker issue that I linked in the agenda, I outlined that at the bottom.
That's just an internal detail, right? I mean, we support all the policy actions.
No, I just need to. I'm trying to figure out what's the amount of work, what's the extra work that needs to be done to actually use this mechanism.
A secondary question, Casey. If let's this is actually about the not just Casey. Maybe I mean, if let's say let's the service principal concept exists. How would we you said how would we enable an external process to operate as the service principal?
Nothing would.
That's we need a different answer. We may want, for example, inventory to be, or maybe there may be other things to be able to assume, or have an assume role like a characteristic, so that we don't have to run all the logic for what may be when end up may end up being relatively complex and obscure library dependent functions that we start adding. I mean, I think bucket inventory might even count. The construction of arbitrarily large indexed files in Parquet format as an example is something that we might not want to do, even though I've thought about doing it that way. But I'm as I chew on it more, I'm not 100% certain we should be doing that. Inside of an RGW instance might be preferable, but having the flexibility to make a decision like that is important.
So maybe I wasn't clear, but no HTTP request in RGW will authenticate as the service principal. It's just an internal thing that will construct, for example, in the bucket logging code, when it wants to check for access, it would check for access as the service principal, and so would require a role policy that grants permissions to that service principal.
Oh, it would simply be a matter of applying role. So you could assume you could assume role and be the service principal. Is that correct? If that's correct, that's fine.
The resource policy would have to grant permissions on the service principal, but then yes.
Well, I mean, maybe I'm not. Am I making sense though? I mean, I'm not sure. I think we're saying the same thing, but I'm not quite entirely sure. If I need an external process that uses S3 to act as this to act as the service principal, that's possible. Or is that an extent? Is that a behavior we would have to enable in some way?
Sorry, you're talking about an external service that's issuing S3 requests against RGW, or just doing things?
No, I think it would. I think it potentially would be, yes.
I think
I don't know if that fits with service principles.
Maybe that's an internal enough concept that we could make it so. A different something else. That's not client visible.
So my guess, for example, with AWS is that the logging is actually is an external service.
Exactly right. Exactly. This
It's an external service.
Yeah. It's an internal. It's a detail internal to AWS architecture. But yeah, if we was to go in that direction too, we need to be able to do that.
Yeah. So like whenever you're doing the changes, there's some, I don't know, some kind of a local cache or file or something that accumulates the journal of the changes to the bucket, and then there's an external service that kicks in every now and then and reads those journals and put them into the destination bucket. I mean, there are a couple of hints that indicate this is the case. One is the concept of the service principal here. The other one is the fact that there are no guarantees. So, and there's no timeline or time grid or anything that they guarantee on. So
yeah,
this kind
I was by no means suggesting we should do our logging that way, which we're not. But for inventory, it might be a case we want to, and there are other things we might end up doing, like if we choose to expose iceberg tables as S3 tables and we compact them or do other junk, these are things where some of those activities might end up being like this, or whether they have service principal involved or not, I don't know, but
are they really only interacting with the storage through S3 requests to RGW?
Unknown, but I mean, we might want them to. Some of them might be cases where they're not at all, but like inventory might be a case where it should. Because all it does once it has constructed some bundle of manifests and Parquet stuff, it just uploads it. It just it just appears in S3. So it probably would just use S3 to talk to RGW. Other things, yeah, could be different.
Okay.
And in fact, they would be. And some of the other cases, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure. I mean, like some of the things like table compaction is, there's dangerous things to assume. Some of that stuff in the iceberg, maybe that just magically happens, and who cares? Some of it talks. Some of it's would be operating over airflight. That's a whole different game. But anyway, but possible.
Okay. Yeah, I had only been envisioning service principal being an internal thing that RGW code just constructs in order to evaluate policy, but if
So
there are use cases to expose it to
yeah, this
S3
is
off,
one.
then
This is one,
we
and
can
where
run a
and
model for that.
that'd be good. I mean, if we're gonna bring it into this is the way this unifies inventory and logging. I'd like the flexibility to to separate the location of the inventory service specifically, and maybe it would apply to other things, maybe it won't, but that's helpful.
Okay. Well, I imagine if you're writing a service for inventory, then it could just talk to, like, use SAL interfaces or Rados to write directly to the backend. But
I don't think that I don't think we would do that. I don't think any of those would. I don't think that would arise that at all. I mean, it would. I mean, most of what it does is it reads things that are in the S3 schema, and later it writes some S3 objects.
okay,
So I think that's a classic example of where you wouldn't be going under the covers to Rados or something.
that makes sense.
Okay, so I mean, I join you then in saying that whatever I mean, if Yuval thinks we can do service principal conveniently, or we can make it easier for him to do it, that's cool.
Yeah, and last time we discussed this, I guess it was 3 weeks ago, I added some details to the tracker issue. Yuval, if you have any questions there, we can follow up the discussion.
Okay, I'm gonna have a look. Thanks.
All right, any other thoughts on this? Okay, moving on. Hey, Krunal, couple topics from you. Take it away.
Yep. First one, actually, just a trivial one. Do you have a concept of account suspension? Like, was that a thought, or it was kind of probably missed? Just wanted to get an idea, probably so that I can open a tracker. Like, we have something similar in user world where you can suspend an user. So, similar note, is there a concept where you could just suspend an account? And then any operations that anybody tries to do, you should get an error message that this user is, or this account is suspended.
I don't think there is such a concept, but I think it could make sense.
I mean, yeah. So there could be a tracker, and this could be a feature, right? Like there could be, you could have an admin command or something which could allow you to suspend the account, which would entail all the underneath users tied to that account will be suspended.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I
Cool.
imagine the account metadata would just get a suspended flag like the user info has.
Correct. Yes. Right. So cool. So I'll add a feature, and then yeah, we could take up on that. Yeah. Just wanted to know, was there a thought behind it, or probably this was never thought in. Some rationale behind not having this. So makes sense. We didn't have that. I'll move on to the second one. Uh, this is kind of, I mean, exact. So there is a flag called as Rados replica read policy. For folks who don't know on top of their head, basically it directs the Rados to during the read operations to tell which OSD to pick up to read data from. By default, when this value is the default value is 0, which means that the read operations will always fall back to the primary the primary OSD for reading. But then you could set up in terms of whether you want the other two values that the flag supports is localize and balance. So it basically tries to the balance one basically tries to round robin across the other OSDs in the replication mode. So I was just thinking, okay, there is already a PR for that. Like, okay, this. So we already added this.
It's what's on main, and we took it downstream in our 8.0 release, so you should it should be backportable.
Which is
To at least
okay.
split.
Sounds good. Yep, that's exactly, yeah, this is what I was saying. So we already have the code in place. We have flags and all those things, but we always pass 0 there. So was this a specific thing? Okay, this completely makes sense. But on the contrary note, even if you don't have this flag at the RGW level and you just set that flag at the Rados level, would it make a difference? So the reason I'm asking so is I know Casey was saying back in days there are some read operation which actually do some kind of writing. So that might impact if you set this at the entire cluster level. So is that the reason or having this specific at
I think that's
RGW level?
handled. I think that's handled in this PR. There are cases where that's where that type of thing is possible, and there are overrides for that.
Okay, so basically that's what if I had to set this at the complete OSD, the Rados level, it wouldn't work correctly for some of the use cases. So it might be better to set up the RGW level, right? Is that what it means, right?
I think that's what I think is exactly what it's meant.
Yeah.
Well, the config option applies to Objector, which is always on the client side, right? Although I guess the OSDs use Objector to talk to each other.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure. I was speaking only of that scenario. I don't know about inter OSD communications, but that's not what that's not what this flag is about.
Yeah, so I think it's important to set on the clients.
So so it has to be set on the client, basically RGW being the client to the Rados layer or the OSD layer here. So would setting that at without this backporting this PR, and if I happen to just set this flag, it would not work correctly. Is what?
Why wouldn't you backport the PR?
No. I mean, without backporting the PR, if I just that flag is already there at the Rados level, right? So if I already have it and I set that flag,
there are some operations that won't behave correctly. Many will. So RGW is doing things with its connection handle set, with Rados handles that wouldn't always work. You could do it for your own activities in Rados,
but not it.
depending on what you do.
Sounds good. Okay. I mean, we already have a PR in main, so probably we can just backport and see how this works up. Okay. That helps. That answers my question. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Granal. Any other topics for today? Daniel, I saw you join a minute ago. Did you have anything?
No, nothing from my side. Thanks.
All right, last call for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.